Oh no, it's horrible creatures! It's giant zucchini! It's man-eating artichokes!
Can you make it rain food again, please?
No, well, I don't really know if I...
You're gonna do it again?
Oh, you gotta be kidding!
Welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm James.
And I'm Matt. This series, we're exploring the sci-fi subgenre of mad science, and in today's episode, we'll be looking at mad food science, food technology. Ooh. Remember that, James? Did you study that at school?
No.
We're looking at Return of the Killer Tomatoes from 1988 and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs from 2009.
Was food technology just learning how to cook for yourself?
Yes. And others.
I never did that. Our school never did that at all. Instead, we did like design and technology. I'm sure you probably did similar.
We did DT too. You're a good cook, though. You picked it up along the way.
Yeah, just about. I need like a recipe. I'm either a recipe guy or just bung it all in.
I'm the same. I'm no scientist in the kitchen.
We've got a few food mad scientists that we're looking at in today's episode. And a little disclaimer as well, we will be looking at Return of the Killer Tomatoes. I think in the previous episode, we talked about Attack of the Killer Tomatoes being in this one. But on viewing both of those, this seemed like the most logical pairing. And let's be honest, it's a bit more coherent than the original.
Genuinely one of the most difficult films to actually get through, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And we watched Twisted Pair, directed by Neil Breen, for our Patreon. Just couldn't follow anything in Attack of the Killer Tomato. But Return of the Killer Tomatoes is more like a real movie, kind of a bigger budget sequel to that weird parody movie from the late 70s.
Yes, which is why we decided to pair this one up with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So it feels like it's going to be it's going to be a food-heavy science episode, but also they're both surprisingly got links to kids' films and kids' shows, which we'll get into in today's episode.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Return of the Killer Tomato, I mean, it's almost basically a kids' movie, isn't it?
I mean, basically, except, yeah, the boobs.
Yeah.
But yes, let's get into Return of the Killer Tomatoes now.
My tomatoes can be made to resemble anyone.
A mad scientist, together with a yuppie pervert, create an army of neo-Nazi plant life.
This time, we shall not fail!
The vegetables of doom have returned with a vengeance. And a kiss.
It's definitely a learning experience.
The return of the Killer Tomatoes.
So this is the sequel to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is sort of iconic, genuinely terrible movie from 1978. A big gap between the two films, 10 years, and then they kind of knocked out a few more sequels at the sort of pace you'd expect from this sort of a movie series after this. How did this happen? Why was there a second film 10 years after the fact?
I think first off, you need to look at what the first film was doing. And the first film was kind of one of the first kind of big parody films, but it didn't quite know what it was doing. And critics watching it were like, it's not satirical enough to be a satire. It's not quite funny enough to be an all-out comedy. It's very schlocky. But the first film was basically an ode to B-movies, wasn't it? And it was kind of spoofing all of these disaster films and things like that. But they never really planned on doing a sequel. Years went by, like you say, a decade or more went by since they put out Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. It had gained a cult following in that time, but it had a really surprising genesis, this film. So, believe it or not, the Muppet Babies is responsible for this film existing.
Okay, the Muppet Babies.
The Muppet Babies. Are you familiar with the Muppet Babies, Matt?
I love the Muppets, but I never watched the Muppet Babies. Was that an animated spin-off of the Muppets?
Yes, they did like a animated TV series from 1986 to 1987 of the Muppet Babies. So it's all the Muppet characters you know, just animated and babies. So in one episode, this is where it starts to get weird. The episode, aptly titled, is The Weirdo Zone. And what happened in this is baby Fozzie Bear was recounting a story or a dream or something like that. And it was one in which he was facing tomatoes. So this is like a big thing for comics, isn't it? Like there's all these there's all that thing about like if you are rubbish on stage as a comedian, people will throw stuff at you and they'll boo you
like
off.
moldy fruit and veg.
So it's kind of like a big thing. And in this, baby Fozzie Bear being a comedian gets attacked by quote unquote silly tomatoes. So he's faced by an attack of the silly tomatoes. And this was a reference to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which was the film which was released in the 70s. So this was a surprisingly big hit in terms of that series. And then this story gets stranger, if you can believe it. So like there's this little reference point in this weird episode of the Muppet Babies. And then somehow, some way, New World Pictures, who owned Marvel Productions, which produced stuff like The Muppet Babies and Transformers and all of that sort of early 80s cartoon stuff for like Fox and all that. They saw the success of that particular episode, which was spoofing Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I think it's even got the bit from Attack of the Killer Tomatoes where they're spoofing a Jaws scene and they're swimming around. I think they use actual footage from the film in this episode of the Muppet Babies. New World Pictures approached Foursquare, who made the original, and said, can you make us a sequel, please? And Foursquare, which is the production company which did Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, never planned on it. But then New World said, hey, here's $2 million.
Jesus.
Can you potentially make us a sequel? And of course, John DeBello, Costa Dillon, and Stephen Peace, who all sort of like worked on the first one.
You twist my arm, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So out of all of that, this film got made. And then off the back of this film, they created an animated TV show and they created all these characters around it based upon the first and the second film. And it just really took on a life of its own. And I remember growing up and knowing Attack of the Killer Tomatoes as a cartoon show.
Yes, I thought I was more familiar with this franchise than I guess I really was when I watched these films for the podcast. Because I watched the TV show. Couldn't say if I liked it or hated it. I was just a little kid and I would watch any cartoon you put me in front of. But I probably watched every episode of it.
And I think that TV show was one of the first Saturday morning cartoons on the Fox Children's Network in 1990. So it was a little bit of time after this, but it's just a mad story that this really weird cult schlocky film has a reference in a animated TV show, and then the makers of that animated TV show give the creators some money to make another sequel, and then this craziness is born out of that. So it's got a mad genesis, this film.
Yeah, what a time to be alive and working in Hollywood when the Muppet Babies makes a joke about your 10-year-old movie and then someone approaches you with millions of dollars and asks you to make another film.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. And I mean, I don't know if it was definitely 2 million or if it was just like $1 million. But either way, they got given some money and told to just go away and make a new film. And this one feels instantly different to the first one. They've done lots of stuff to try and make it fit in as a sequel. So it plays with the idea of mad science in this, hence why we're talking about it in our Mad Science series. But it also expands the mythology of the first film. So with the first film, how far did you get through the first film before you realised it was
bad?
Yeah, it was not what you thought it might be based on the animated show.
A few minutes. I mean, I quite like the opening scene's really good. It's like a woman is like killed by some killer tomatoes in her apartment. They climb up out of the sink and it's schlocky and it's silly and it's great fun. I think within a few scenes of the first film, you sort of start to realise that there's almost no connection between the scenes and very little script and it just doesn't make any sense as a movie. So like it's pretty bad. I understand why like some people might love it and it becomes like a cult film and it's pretty mad. But I did really think it was quite awful. What I quite liked in Return of the Killer Tomatoes is, 10 years have passed and they've come back to these same people to make a sequel, and they're obviously like incredibly proud of what they made. Like they reused a lot of footage to kind of do the recap, but they make a kind of metatextual joke out of the recap, commenting on reusing footage. And yeah, like you're saying, they go to quite great lengths to like connect it to the old film, like explaining who the characters are, and actually this character survived, here's what happened to the bad guy, he's in jail, all of this stuff, like recapping you a bit like it's a bit like the start of Evil Dead 2, kind of recapping the first film and then setting you up for the second one. But obviously like with this enormous sense of pride and love of this god-awful movie they made 10 years before.
Yeah, it's definitely got it's loved by some, the first film, but it is a difficult watch as a lover of narrative and films. Yeah, basically, when it comes down to it, that's what it is. But they did like loads of ingenious stuff with it. Well, I say ingenious, they were very clever with the mistakes that happened. There's a helicopter crash at the start of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and this happened when they were filming something. Like the helicopter did like a tailspin.
Yeah, I remember watching it and thinking like, holy shit, that looks like a real helicopter crash.
So it was a real crash that happened on set, and then after it happened, they kind of carried on filming. The pilot got out, they're all okay. And then they carried on filming and they just added a few lines where it was like, oh, these tomatoes came out of nowhere and hit that helicopter and brought it down. Like ridiculous stuff like that. The first film, they're breaking into song at points as well. It's absolutely madcap. But in this, they've got more of a plot, haven't they? So what is the plot of Return of the Killer Tomatoes?
So probably the biggest change is that no one really made the tomatoes in the first film. They just kind of came into existence. There is some references to like a sort of failed Department of Agriculture experiment, gone wrong. But there's no mad scientist at the helm. So that's what they introduce in Return of the Killer Tomatoes. We've got Professor Gangrene, a classic mad scientist archetype, who was actually the one who is revealed to have been responsible for what is now being called the Great Tomato War and creating the Killer Tomatoes, the first film. And 10 years later, he's got a plan to revive all of that, bring back his tomatoes and take over the world, basically. And he's doing that through mutating tomatoes with toxic waste, and this enables him to turn them into humanoid tomato people that he has control over, like what they, their physical build and what they look like. And that's how he's going to enact his plan to take over the world. And one of them goes rogue and escapes and helps our heroes defeat him. Yeah,
that's the mad science of it all. And that's how this film kind of progresses. You're following this character of Tara, who's a tomato turned human, who is also very, very gorgeous as well. And she's like the love interest of the main character. So they're running around together and there's lots of hijinks that ensue from that. But one of the interesting things I found about watching the beginning of this was the lengths that they'd gone to talk about how the world had changed since the Great Tomato War. The way they they still want to make pizza. And they're making pizza with like peanut butter and all this kind of like disgusting stuff and making like sweet pizzas. And it's just like the way that they describing the impact of this great disaster that happened. I found that quite interesting just in this mad film. The fact that they were like, okay, let's set the scene. Tomatoes have attacked, but now the world is different. They're outlawed. You can't be seen near any of them. All of this kind of stuff. I think that kind of added a bit for me as well, even though it's a ridiculous film. They kind of thought that bit out a little bit.
Yeah, you're into your alternate histories of America TV shows, aren't you? That's like you like For All Mankind and Watchmen. This is exactly your jam. I can see why you would like that kind of element of the film. Yeah, I thought it was they really went into the most detail around the pizzas, really, didn't they? Right? And it seems like, I guess in 1988, getting a pizza that didn't have tomato sauce on it was like an utterly crazy madcap idea that you could base a load of comedy around, and now it's just a sort of disappointing mistake you make in a pizza restaurant.
When you get the white sauce pizza by accident, or the barbecue. I mean, the barbecue base can be all right, but
Not for me.
I'm a purist.
Yeah,
I want
exactly.
the tomato on a pizza.
But they don't go down any of those routes. They think, okay, there's no tomato, so people are going to start putting like candy and peanut butter and stuff on pizzas instead.
What is it about America and pizza?
I don't know. Lots of Italian
It's just-
immigrants, I think.
Yeah, but it's just like pizza is like such a center point of like the way you think about America as well. And like it just made me think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well. They live in New York and they just eat pizza all the time. I mean, it is such a staple. So for there to be a world without tomatoes, you can kind of see how impactful that would be in America in general.
Yeah. I had pizza for dinner every Saturday. My mum would make pizza because that was the day that Turtles was on TV. So, and if I'm going to have pizza now as an adult, it just like, I want it to be like, if I have pizza and it's not a Saturday, that doesn't work in my mind.
I love that. It's good to keep those traditions alive as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
But going back to this film, the experiments that are happening. So we talked a bit about that and what Professor Gangrene is doing. He creates very specific kinds of humans, doesn't he? He creates
Babes and
Tara.
hunks.
Babes and hunks. That is literally it. He just keeps creating generic bodybuilding Rambo-looking guys to protect his house, and then just creates one perfect woman. And then in the midst of that, he also creates FT, which is the fuzzy tomato.
Fuzzy tomato, which is an accident, right?
Yeah, and gets thrown in the bin straight away. But FT becomes the kind of the fun, strange R2-D2-y kind of like side character, doesn't he?
Yeah, the cute animal sidekick, I guess. Or robot, yeah. R2-D2 being a good example.
But in terms of the mad science look of it as well, and these experiments that he's doing, it's very much like a traditional mad scientist lab, isn't it? They've got all of the tropes. There's all the different machines that you would expect to see. And they do quite a fun thing with the house as well. Because it's meant to be low budget, they do loads of ham-fisted jokes about how they've got no budget and how they need to get money to make the film. There's a big, long advertising sequence, which just made me think of Wayne's World as well, when they do that Wayne's World thing and they're like, brought to you by Pepsi. I love a delicious Pepsi and stuff like that. But they go overboard with this and it becomes really, like you say, it's very metatextual. They keep referring to what's happening in the filming. They get halfway through the filming and they've got no budget to carry on. And they're like, well, how are we going to finish it? We need some advertising in there. But going back to the house, they've got this picture. It's just like a set picture. It's really badly. It's like it's not. There's no attempt to make it look like a real house. It's just a picture they keep showing to do the establishing shots, and it's that kind of schlocky nature which I quite enjoyed about this. Like all the little bits they've got in there.
But they do also have a real house that they do film around, which is a big house. I don't think we ever get a big enough shot to see if it looks anything like the painting they use for establishing shots. But it's obviously like a massive property that they're shooting on and filming outside of. So that's it's more of a gag about the budget, isn't it, than a lack of a budget. They do have a big house for Dr. Gangrene to be in. But yeah, his lab is pretty great. I mean, it's a perfect kind of like mid to late 80s mad scientist. It's very colourful, no skimping on the set dressing in the lab. You've got a massive glass chamber that he's kind of creating the tomato people inside of, and just bubbling beakers and test tubes everywhere, and oscilloscopes and stuff like that. All the accoutrements of mad science that we've come to expect populating this lab, and with just a green glow everywhere that emanates out from the basement and into, anyone who's peering in gets a green light shone in their face.
And you've got the doctor's assistant again, haven't you? But this Igor is like spoofed once again. He looks more like Rocky from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, I was thinking of Rocky because he's one of the genetically modified hunks. So he definitely is, basically similar to Rocky, but he has this nice kind of, they've given him a real personality, which is that he's got this real interest in, he just wants to be on TV and he wants to be a news reporter. So he's kind of desperate to live out this dream. Meanwhile, he is, you know, essentially like a slave to Dr. Gangrene, who, you know, has to do his mad science bidding.
And that's quite a nice callback to all of the news reporting spoofing that they did in the first film as well. The fact they've got this character who is obsessed with the way the media is being reported and wants to do it and is reenacting being a news reporter for most of the film whenever he gets a chance. There's a moment when he's pretending to do a news report with a teddy bear, asking ridiculous questions, which then you think, oh, well, he's pretending and he's being ridiculous. But then you see the actual news reporters in this world as well, and they are just as terrible as he is when he's practicing. But it's all making a comment on sort of pop culture and consumerism and the tropes going on in the media throughout. And they do this throughout the entire film, don't they? Like even the opening, when you just hear the people working in the cinema talking about, oh, we put the wrong film on. We've put on big-breasted babes at the beach or something.
What, the opening, the kind of the framing device they use?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of on the wavelength of stuff like Deadpool before Deadpool was a thing, because I think the Deadpool comics came out in the 90s, didn't they? So it was kind of on the verge of all of this kind of meta stuff where you've got characters referring to the fact that they're in some sort of entertainment media. You've got lots of that in this one.
Yeah, and you already mentioned the kind of the middle segment where it turns into like product placement jokes, basically, for quite a long time, to be honest. Kind of drags that bit, but you know, it's a good gag, stopping the film halfway through and saying we've run out of money. What are we going to do about it?
So you said at the start there was like a deliberate move to make this more kid-friendly, more teenager-friendly.
I think so.
Do you think that's obvious in the film, or do you think they're like trying to have a foot in both camps still?
Well, I think it's pretty juvenile humor. So the stuff that makes it adult is kind of around like sex and nudity, basically, and that's about it, really. Like, I don't think the sort of commentary on consumerism and all that is particularly, you know, it's not mind-blowing stuff, you know.
No.
And I think in the main it's pretty juvenile humor, and then you couple that with you know, what I assume are supposed to be teenage characters and a fuzzy little sidekick. And again, they make a joke at the end about the fuzzy little sidekick, like, oh, this would make a good present for your kid. It's on sale in the lobby. But that is kind of like having your cake and eating it too, because it's like, aha, we're being satirical about the fuzzy little sidekick. But also, you put him in the movie and he's been in the whole movie. Like, you did that to appeal to kids. So you can't kind of then like be subversive at the end and say like, oh, you know, it would be silly if we sold this as a, you know, because I bet there were toys of FT at some point, especially after the cartoon came out.
Yeah, because FT was a character in the animated show as well. So they're just gonna, well, they're kind of like prophesizing exactly what's going to happen to the franchise, because they did release a bunch of toys and they had lots of stuff to do with this. So they sort of franchised that out without, well, they were making a funny joke about it here, but that's exactly what happens, which is kind of ironic.
But also I think there's just an element of like, they had weird ideas about what they wanted to do with this franchise. I think there's some real like, you know, gung-ho guerrilla filmmaking going on here. I don't think these guys did very much else apart from Killer Tomatoes movies in their careers. I've had a quick look at, you know, there's three main guys. There's John Tabello, who directs them. He also writes with Costa Dillon and Stephen Peace. They all, I think, show up in various roles. Peace in particular is the guy who owns the pizza restaurant, the uncle, Wilbur, and he's in the first one as well. So he's like kind of plays the biggest role out of the three people. But I don't think they've done many other things outside of Killer Tomato stuff. But like I said, they care about the product they made. They have ideas about what they want to do with it. Yes, they're being a bit satirical with it, but also like they kind of end with a gag about "see you in France," and then 2 movies later, they do make Killer Tomatoes Take France, or whatever it's called. There's one set in France. So I think they've got some ideas about what they can do with their franchise. And I think, if these films were a little bit more successful, they would have continued making them after the 4th one and, keep going with it. They've obviously got... I think they're just having fun doing what they're doing. That does come across in the first film, but there's so little like connective tissue to like make it watchable in the first film that this is much more fun when they've got a bit more money, they're a little bit more mature, maybe spent a bit more time writing it and making it make sense as a movie, but then still having that sense of fun filmmaking that kind of adds a little extra ingredient to the tomato sauce.
Yeah, because the whole film feels very happenstance, doesn't it? Because I'm pretty sure that they just came up with the idea of killer tomatoes and then the rest of the stuff wrote itself after that.
Yeah.
So they've got an idea and then they've shoehorned a bunch of stuff in, but then they made the first film and then somebody gives them a load of money and then they're like, well, we can do more stuff with this. And they do kind of do a lot more, especially with the characters. Like you've got the main sort of protagonist of this, Chad Finletter, played by Anthony Stark, and then you've got Tara, who is the tomato turned human, played by Karen Waldron, who I don't think did much after this, but I think Karen in particular as Tara, she's quite a good comic actress in this. There's lots of kind of knowing physical comedy that she's doing. And her character's like not just one-dimensional as you would think it would be. She's very sex positive. She's doing all of this stuff around building relationships. She's in a terrible relationship with the professor, so she leaves. They kind of do stuff with her that I wasn't expecting from such a schlocky B movie.
Yeah, I think they all get it. I think everybody in the film is in on the joke and understands the joke, and they do give like good performances for what this is. Like I think I would say the biggest problem with this film is it's just like never that funny. I got a couple of laughs in the whole film, but like it's not really that funny. But I do find something like charming and endearing about this weird little sequel to an even weirder, even more little film, like you say, that was totally happenstance, and now they're like almost like burdened with mythology. Like, okay, we're in the killer tomatoes business because we made that stupid film, and now we've got millions of dollars to spend making another one, so let's get more into this. I'd almost say like the biggest problem with the film, apart from like not being that funny, is there actually isn't enough tomatoes in it.
Yeah.
Because they introduced this concept of gangrene, like, transforming tomatoes into humans. So he's got a fully human army. So we don't actually get the scenes of like tomatoes rolling towards people and like climbing all over their bodies and killing them, which was far and away the best stuff in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, is just tiny tomatoes gibbering away on top of people as they eat them, or giant John Carpenter beach ball tomatoes squelching around chasing people.
Like
That's
Dark Star, you think? Yeah.
That's what makes it iconic, the first one. And they've sadly like moved away from that here to take it down the kind of more mad scientist route with the transformations and stuff.
And then they kind of, I think they take it down the more puppeteering route later on in the subsequent sequels. But with this one, I think it's interesting looking at it as a 80s film as well, because if you compare it to Weird Science, there was something going on in the 80s where it was everything seemed leaning towards comedy more. I don't think we've really come across any mad science films from the 80s which really hit the sort of the more sci-fi of it. I mean, I know there must have been some around there, and I'm sure we'll cover them throughout the series or throughout the rest of the series, but there is definitely a pocket of these weird science films which are kind of mixing horror and comedy and sci-fi together, and there's kind of this hodgepodge of filmmaking going on where they're sticking on a kind of like weird sci-fi concept and then creating something that doesn't quite work because it's not fully knowing of what it is in those terms. I mean, they've got a funny premise, and this is just an example of having a film which you didn't think would get anywhere become something else and then suddenly become this franchise out of nowhere, just because this is the changing way of Hollywood, isn't it? Because you've got more producers involved. It's a big business. We still sort of in the age of like VHSs, and after this, the Killer Tomatoes films became direct to video. So it's this kind of flux in the film industry and sort of where sci-fi is at this point.
Yeah, and going into that kind of direct to video pipeline, because with the sort of timing of when these movies were coming out and when direct to video movies were becoming popular and the boom in kind of video rentals and video purchases, it's sort of perfect timing to be in the Killer Tomatoes business, I guess.
And it's also a good precursor to what happens in the 90s, particularly to one actor in this film who I was not expecting to see, old George Clooney, popping up in an 80s film with the longest hair I've ever seen him with.
The big mullet.
He's like a
And
proper
an earring,
straight
I
man.
think.
Yeah. He's like, he's just an absolute horn dog throughout the entire film.
Yeah, he's pretty sleazy and annoying, like doesn't take the sort of premise of the story seriously while the other characters are getting all worked up.
But I think he's quite knowing, isn't he? I think
Yeah.
it's difficult because it is George Clooney and he's playing like a sort of schmoozy kind of hunk character almost. But he is still trying to play a straight man, isn't he, in this?
Slightly more so than Chad, yeah. I think he really shines in that product placement bit when it all kind of breaks the fourth wall and stuff, and George Clooney gets to do a bit more of the actual comedy. And I appreciated that for him. A really interesting film in his oeuvre, I guess, isn't it? And he goes on to be like one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. But, you know, everyone's got to start somewhere. Professor Gangrene is the original Gomez Adams.
Yeah, I found that as well.
So it's not kind of devoid of stars.
As soon as I read that, I was like, of course he is.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course he's
you
Gomez.
can see it.
Yeah, you can see it instantly.
Yeah.
But this film's like an interesting example of how you can go from a schlocky B movie to suddenly franchising stuff and also adding that comedy into it. So things like the Troma films and Toxic Avenger basically followed the same kind of formula, didn't they? Because Toxic Avenger came out, that became a franchise series of films, again, schlocky, ridiculous, and then an animated series got spawned off the back of it because kids will buy the toys because they're crazy monsters and creatures, and a bunch of teenage boys and young boys are going to buy that kind of stuff because they like freaky monsters. So they're kind of franchising that out. But then I think there's something about this sci-fi parodying that we're seeing again with Mad Science, because it's so easy to throw into a kind of parody film.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's a thing that you can layer over existing material, I think, as well, and kind of pull out the mad science element of something and make it the main thing or make it more humorous and stuff. I think, I mean, that's what they do in the next film we're going to talk about as well, taking the source material of that. So on that note, should we move on to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and talk about our second film today?
Sounds good to me. Let's check the weather forecast.
Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
Okay, everybody, you are not going to believe this one, but I am standing in the middle of a burger rain. You may have seen a meteor shower, but you've never seen a shower meatier than this. For a town stuck eating sardines, this is totally manna from heaven.
This tastes significantly better than sardines.
Yes, it is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Matt. I can confirm.
I cannot imagine anything more terrifying than like meat falling from the sky.
I know. I was thinking about this watching this film, and I was like, oh, it's meat.
Yeah, there's a sort of the most horrible example of that, like midway through the film when it sort of fully opens as a theme park and there's the steak restaurant and it's just like absolutely hammering enormous steaks down on people's like heads and plates and stuff and like smashing crockery and glasses and stuff, and everyone's just loving it. And I think, I mean, I think the joke of the scene was that people weren't reacting with horror, like when it's like smashing like plates and stuff, and they're just sort of laughing with delight. I was like, oh my God.
But this is another one of those films which has this kind of crazy mad science to it, but it's based on a quite quaint book from the 70s by Judy and Ron Barrett. But they've kind of taken the initial premise again. So like with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, they've got an idea. There's killer tomatoes. In this, they've kind of taken the title, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and they've really molded it into a full narrative film and adapted that short kids book into something which is quite different from the source material, I feel.
Yeah. It's not a DreamWorks film, is it? But it's that DreamWorks animation model that we talked about it a bit on Patreon when we did The Wild Robot, you know, taking a kid's book and then just, so in some cases, just going off on a total tangent, really, from the source material.
Yeah, because the source material is it's a grandfather telling his grandchildren a bedtime story about this town called Chew and Swallow, where food and drink is falling from the sky in place of the weather. So that's the main premise of that book. This film takes it one step further and really leans into the idea of the science of it. So you've got an inventor in this who is creating something, and you've got a town which is in need of tourism. Their main export of sardines has kind of dried up in terms of being able to sell those to other places. It's this remote island that they live on, which is just under the A of the Atlantic. And there's lots of stuff in this which gives it a bit more shape than I thought I would get when I went in to watch this film.
Why? What were you expecting?
I thought it would just be... I didn't think it would be as heartfelt as it was. I think they really added some extra stuff on it, because it's as much as it is about the mad science and that kind of stuff, it's kind of got some good, well, it has got some good moral story stuff in it. So it's that whole sort of not being afraid of being who you are, and all of your relationships with people, and learning not to be afraid of these kind of things. I think that's when it gets like really like, let's teach the kids a lesson about life.
Yeah, fairly sort of standard kids movie messaging about being yourself and stuff like that. But, you know, well done. This is a really like beloved film as well, isn't it? It was really successful. And I didn't watch it when it came out. I was just, you know, obviously the wrong age for it. But I think that people who grew up with this film really loved it, didn't they? Yeah,
and it's created by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. So
is it their first film?
I think it is. I think they worked on Extreme Movie before this, which was 2008, which I assume is some sort of spoof. A satirical sex comedy film. So they went from a satirical sex comedy film to this.
Like superhero movie, that sort of era of films, yeah.
Exactly.
I don't remember Extreme Movie. Is that like a Jackass parody?
It's kind of like Not Another Teen Movie, that kind of thing from the looks of it. That's what I imagine it to be. Like
good stuff.
A spoof of sketches.
A good time in filmmaking history. The blank movie, X movie from Scary Movie onwards.
All of those just continuously spoofing once again. And then they went from that to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. They got fired from this as well at the start because their script hadn't quite hit the mark at the beginning of the process. And then they brought some other writers on, and then the other writers couldn't do it, so they were brought back on. It was a bit of back and forthing in the production process from the sounds of it. But in the end, they really sort of looked at the nuanced bits of the story, and they added the kind of stuff about, because they had the character of the dad as this guy who owned the sardine shop, but he wasn't Flint's dad in the original script. So they added that father-son relationship in there as well after continuous rewrites. So I think that kind of honed in on what the film was about.
Fan the heart.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than just finding the meatballs, which it has in abundance.
So what do you think of Flint Lockwood then as a mad science lead character? He's kind of we've talked a little bit about the spectrum of mad scientists, haven't we? And I think today we're talking about opposite ends of that spectrum, right? We've got a world domination mad scientist, and we've got a humanitarian, philanthropic, help the world mad scientist in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
He means well, but he does have that sense of hubris to him. Because at the end of the day, he wants to make an invention that's going to make him famous so he can be on that wall amongst all of his idols like Tesla and Alexander Bell and all of these people that he looks up to as making these great inventions. So he's got this real desire to be one of them. But he does, like, he's bumbling at the same time, which makes you like him because he continuously seems to mess things up.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about the kind of likable humanitarian mad scientists, you've got to add in the bumblingness to cut through the hubris. There's always hubris in a mad scientist, but that hubris can take on a really dark tone. In many of the films that we've looked at this series, it can go down that route. But if you add in the bumbling nature, then it kind of reduces that the scariness of the hubris.
It's that humanizing, isn't it? Because scientists can be scary because of how intimidating their intelligence is. So I think when you add in that real sort of human nature to them, they don't seem as scary to an audience. They seem more relatable. So you need to have that relatability in these characters. And that's exactly what Flint is. He is this relatable character. We see how he was bullied at school before he sort of found himself a bit more. He's still kind of bullied when he's older, but he's got this real passion for science and invention. So he's constantly just making these crazy inventions in the garden in his weird little science lab, which is, what even is that? It's like a weird kind of tree house that they've made.
Is it a water
tree.
tower?
That's what it is. So it's like, but it serves as a kind of...
Or did he build it? I'm not even sure, actually, if it is a water tower, but it sort of looks like a water tower.
Yeah.
It's just an enormous construction that he's got his lab at the top of. I really like his lab. Again, it's another sort of classic mad scientist lab design, but this one's very computerized and high-tech. I thought, Batman would be very at home there. It's like something like Batcave. But there were aspects of it where, like, the entrance and exit bit is just like just a bit of tarp that he's painted a more elaborate metal door over.
I love
and he has
that.
to put it to one side. And there is a sliding door that he goes through, but I think it's sort of supposed to just be like paper or card because it doesn't open, or he has to slide it, So there's this homemade rinky-dink aspect to his high-tech mad science lab.
I think it's that childlike aspect of his personality as well, because he is very creative. He's trying to think up all these weird and wonderful inventions and experiments, like the rat birds and the shoes, which are like the spray-on shoes, which turns out you can never take them off. I mean, his feet must be so rank.
Yeah.
Just being in those shoes for ages. But that's beside the point. He's doing all of that kind of stuff. And then also he's imagining how it's going to work. And it's the power of his imagination is really interesting in this because, like you say, he's making these kind of drawings of stuff. And then when he goes through things and is going through his process of how he needs to invent stuff, he's like, okay, do this, do that, do that. And then he like makes the do sound on like little keyboards and things. And he's really playing scientist as much as he is a scientist.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's really interesting. He's never really grown up. He's got a bit of arrested development due to his bullying and lack of success in the scientific field, I think.
And that's kind of compounded by the fact that he's got this kind of rocky relationship with his dad. It's not exactly rocky, but they're kind of distant. They're typical male relationships, I would say. There's that kind of let's not talk about our feelings too much.
Yeah, and just very, very different men, aren't they? One, sort of simple, happy with his life, running a sardine fishing shop. And then, someone who wants to explore science and leave his mark on the world and escape this sardine island.
I thought the fact that they had a sardine island was quite a nice comparison with the world without tomatoes and then the world with only sardines. I quite liked that going from these two films.
I love sardines, but a disgusting thought to eat them all day, every day. And sardine juice.
They stick one in a baby's bottle as well. Things like that. Yeah.
But we talked about his hubris as a mad scientist, and the hubris of a mad scientist always has to kind of come crashing down, doesn't it? So there's very much a film of two halves. It's just pumping up his ego after years of defeats. So we understand why he's an underdog susceptible to, the allures of the success that he finds. But then a second half where everything just goes disastrously wrong at the hands of his ridiculous food weather invention.
He's a bit like Seth Brundle in some ways. I never thought I'd be making this comparison.
Ooh,
but
go on.
So Seth's like, I want to make this creation. I'm going to win a Nobel Prize. It's going to be great. But he goes that one step too far and he has full confidence in his machine. So he does whatever he can to make it. He makes it and then it goes wrong. And that's what happens in this. He makes it and it goes wrong. And he thinks, Seth thinks that he's become this superhuman, new species. It's refined him. It's filtered out his humanity. It's filtered out his body and he's become super. In this, Flint feels like, oh, I've created this food making device and now it works even better because it's in the clouds and everybody loves it. So this is great. But he's not thinking ahead on the repercussions. And by continuously using it, he lets himself into a world of hurt and disappointment.
And they both kind of have the warning signs, don't they? A lot of mad scientist characters do, but particularly between Seth Brundle and Flint, they kind of have the opportunity to see that things aren't quite going according to plan, and they should rein it back in and be a bit more, act a bit more like a professional scientist, with more responsibility and caution. But it's their ego in both cases that pushes them onward to do more, particularly like in Flint's case with the mayor kind of sitting on his shoulder, egging him on. He's got his better angels, but the mayor's there to kind of push him over the edge, push the button, make the bigger hot dogs.
The mayor's a really interesting character because he's got small man syndrome at the start, doesn't he? He wants to be the big mayor that everybody knows, and he's got these delusions of grandeur. He wants to create this island where they've got this sardine theme park, and then that goes tits up. So he then tries to jump on the bandwagon of this giant food and sees how he can make that bigger. And he physically gets bigger as well, doesn't he? Because he's eating so much food. He just becomes this enormous bear. So he does become the big mayor that he wants to be, physically as well, just because he just can't stop eating this genetically modified food from the sky.
Genetically mutated, I think, isn't it? It's drawing in radiation, or it's using radiation. There's a very rapid fire explanation of what's going on from Flint about halfway through the film that I didn't quite catch or understand, but it's something to do with excess radiation, and it's continually, I think, cyclically drawing in radiation in an exponential way.
There's some good pseudoscience in this, and they are playing with the kind of imagination element of this. And the other film I kept thinking about whilst watching this was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, because
it's just giant landscapes that make everyone look shrunk, particularly towards the end.
Exactly. It's kind of digging into that fantasy of, hey, look, there's a giant Oreo, but hey, we can do this with any kind of food. So the different weather that he bakes with the different foods, and they have quite a lot of fun with that, all the different things that they do. They have the big snowball fight with ice cream. There's the giant Jell-O palace that he makes for his love interest, played by Anna Faris, the character of Sam. So they're doing all these kind of like fun set pieces with the food.
Yeah, with the kind of ever increasing mountain of food behind the town. I really like the whole sequence where they open up. There's some Honey I Shrunk the Kids stuff towards the end, but it also really reminded me of Jurassic World, specifically Jurassic World. You know, like when the theme park opens up and then it all goes wrong. The sort of imagery of zooming out and showing that the whole town has become a theme park, but you have this enormous pile of excess food that's just been stuffed behind a dam that's clearly going to burst, and then when everything goes wrong and like the town is being destroyed, I was having like visions of like the pterodactyls and stuff swooping down and grabbing people, but it's like spaghetti.
It's spaghetti, and you've got a guy in a cheese bath just eating nachos.
Yeah.
Like some of it just it might be food porn to some people, but it's also kind of like creeps you out some of the ways they like eat this food and interact with it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a cleanliness hygiene thing for me. I don't like it when film and TV like depict someone in a bath of something edible and they're like, it's delicious. So that like the guy in the nacho cheese is like, what, like that's tasty, like where your balls are, like, like that's gross, man. You're in a bath of cheese and you're eating the cheese. Like it just absolutely disgusts me. So like when a steak falls on someone's head, it's like, well, I mean, if it's your head, it's fine, but I mean, a steak on the floor, that's gross.
It does say with a chance of meatballs, so
yeah, cheesy with a chance of meatballs.
Cheesy with a chance of meatballs. Wow. But you've got all of these elements in this kind of making this children's mad science sci-fi film. And I talked about the way that they're kind of learning the lesson about who they really are as it goes on. And Flint learns that he can be this like great scientist and he can make friends and he can do that by being himself. And also you get Sam Sparks, who learns that she can be her nerdy self. There's lots of like kind of sweet moments where they're talking science and she tries to hide it, he tries to hide it. They can be nerdy. You can be a nerd, guys. It's okay. We do this every time on our podcast. We are absolute nerds. And it's kind of teaching kids that as well. It's like you can be yourself and you can do that. And even with Andy Samberg's character of Brent, who was this big celebrity because he was the baby which was advertised along with the sardines. He was the mascot for the sardines. He learns that like I'm more than just this celebrity when he gets it all stripped away from him. So he kind of has a bit of a character arc. I think a lot of them do go on a bit of a journey, like Tim does, Flint's dad, Flint, Sam, Brent. I mean, the mayor just ends up in the ocean.
Yeah, what happens to the mayor?
I think he just goes off. He just escapes.
He floats away sort of disappointed with the outcome of things, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I don't think he's learned a lesson, but you're right, everyone else kind of learns a lesson and grows as a character. What did you think of the fact that Flint kind of saved the day with another mad science invention? Like he ends up just pulling out his spray-on shoe thing to block up the... what is the machine called? A Flamundunde?
Sounds like the man with two brains.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like that because basically what it's saying is all of your inventions that you've seen as failures actually can be used for something. And even when it goes wrong, there's still some sort of redeeming quality about them.
That's interesting. That's a very positive take. I was a bit like...
It's a positive film, man.
It is a positive film, but I was just a bit like, has he really learned his lesson? Because,
oh, no.
Yeah, because like one of his mad inventions turns out to be exactly the answer he needs to fix the disaster of his other mad invention. So it's kind of still like aggrandizing his mad science and his ego in the end. I mean, he's definitely like, he's grown as a person, so I guess it's kind of earned that. But I was a bit like, oh, he's got the other ridiculous invention that he can just use. I guess Flint's going to go off and keep inventing ridiculous, dangerous inventions because one of them fixed the other one, so why not?
Yeah, but now he's found love and has a good relationship with his dad, so maybe he'll be less mad?
So he's got the people in his life that will talk him down
Yeah.
from the madness and the hubris of the mad scientist. That's the emotional journey. That's the positive emotional journey of a mad scientist character mapped out in this film.
Yeah, because even if you go back to one of the first films we looked at, The Invisible Ray, the character that Boris Karloff was playing in that, he pushes away his family, pushes away his wife.
Oh, yeah.
So in this, by bringing in other people, you kind of ground yourself a bit in reality. And you kind of need that grounding when you're having all of these crazy ideas that are really out there and getting sucked up by your work. I think that's the kind of... I like to think that's what it's aiming for at the end.
I think so. I think when we're talking about this end of the mad scientist scale, that's the character arc you have to go on. At the other end of the scale, your Professor Gangrene's, for example, or your Victor Frankenstein's, there's the redemption's less likely, and you just have to basically learn your lesson at the hands of your creation, learn your lesson the hard way, basically, and die normally.
It's funny though as well, because all of these kind of emotional bits that they're putting in here, that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller are putting in, they kind of translate into the rest of the films that they do. So if you think about the Lego movie, it's that idea that anybody can be, like, everything is awesome. You can be the main character of this story. And then they produced and wrote Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So again, it's that kind of like
individuality.
It's that. Yeah. And that's what they're really good at, I think. I mean, they've had some not so great films, but I think the majority of them that they've been a part of, they've done a lot of producing. Like the ones that they've written and directed together, or the ones that they partnered up, have really kind of hit the mark. They're also interestingly attached to Project Hail Mary, which is coming up before long. So
cool.
Be interesting seeing them like cover proper epic sci-fi as well.
Yeah, it's a funny career they've had, that balance of like quite silly movies, but then the ones that hit, that they when they can like find the real heart of a story in a film, then it'll just be a massive hit, basically.
But I think they've got the right idea with the way that they treat the technology in this as well, because they make it fantastical and fun, but they also give it a bit of life, and the way that the characters interact with it. I'm thinking about the lab and the moment when Flint's dad is trying to send the email, and it's so complicated for him, even though it's just you've got to move the mouse, but he's trying to move the mouse. He doesn't quite know how to do it. And we've all met people or know people or are people that have those kind of difficulties with certain technology. So seeing that was a really kind of a nice moment of the kind of two worlds meeting as well, which I really enjoyed.
And what did you think of the actual, the invention itself, the Flaminder River?
I thought it was an interesting one because it's basically like it's any kind of, well, it reminded me a bit of my air fryer, although my air fryer isn't as great as this, because like you've got the different settings, you put the food in, you've got a little screen, you can work it all out. It's that kind of thing. And I think there's more and more like cooking technology that is looking like the invention from this film. And it's kind of got connection. When we think about sci-fi, it makes me think of Star Trek with the way that they have food and that. I forget what they call it. It's
the
like
replicators.
The replicators, yeah. So it's that idea of replicating food and bringing it to life. But there's something just a little bit off about the way that they're genetically changing the molecular structure of water to make it anything they want to eat. I feel like that can't be good for you.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I think there's elements of the replicator in there. I thought it also kind of looked like landing units that land on the moon. You know, it kind of had also just sort of looked a bit like a rocket ship. It's funny you mentioned Star Trek. Have you seen the first Star Trek movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture?
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of going down like a Vija route, you know, the satellite in that's, I mean, it's been ages since I've seen that first one, but the satellite's sort of gone sentient, hasn't it? And it's just sort of got the remainder of its programming from way back when. But that's kind of what's happening here, right? It's gone off on its own. And it was kind of reminding me of like Vija and GLaDOS from the end of the Portal game. GLaDOS and I can't remember the name of Stephen Merchant's character in the second game, but similar, like, you know, they become this mass of technology that it's just kind of like gathered into itself, so it sort of becomes a biological, technological monster swarming in the center of something and kind of extending on a protrusion out to like attack you, which is what the machine is doing at the end of this film. The whole like production design of the inside of the giant meatball in the sky was amazing. It's like this Technicolor sci-fi horror show of, you know, and like the giant chickens inside there, and
God, the giant chickens. And then when Brent gets in the body of one of the giant chickens and starts using it as some sort of exosuit to fight off the other chickens. Like, yeah, it's, again, the sci-fi elements are there in this crazy film about weird giant food. Like the fact that they have this sentient food coming about towards the end.
Yeah, like the tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly, like the tomatoes. You've got these crazy gummy bears that the
terrifying, the gummy bears. I don't know what I found. Something very scary about the gummy bears, James.
Yeah, well, luckily Neil Patrick Harris playing a monkey was there to save the day, playing Steve.
To violently tear them apart.
Yeah, great.
The whole sequence was horrifying.
And then, because it's very kind of body horror-esque, isn't it, all of this stuff that's happening? Food horror, is that a thing? There must be. But it's probably connected to body horror. So the gummy bear gets its head ripped off and then places another gummy bear's head on its head. And the chicken thing, I think, is the thing that really got me. It was these rotisserie
the way it
chickens.
like swallowed him.
Yeah, swallowed him up. And then the fact that he's using the body of this chicken to fight these other chickens, I think there was just something that really got in my head about that. Like, this is kind of disgusting.
Yeah. No, I found a lot of it disgusting, and I actually was trying to figure out how much of it was deliberate, because there is a transition in the film, isn't there? And it's not just when the tornado shows up. I think that there is a transition where you're supposed to shift towards being a bit disgusted, and it's when he's starting to clock that, you know, the hot dogs are too big and things are starting to get a bit out of control. But I find the whole premise disgusting, and I think, you know, that's probably like I've got some food hygiene insecurities or whatever that I'm just projecting onto the film.
I mean, totally.
But like
valid.
the idea of food falling from the sky onto the floor and then you're supposed to enjoy it, that's revolting. But did any of the sort of magic of like, oh, you know, meatballs from the sky or whatever, did any of that catch you? Like when the kids are like diving into giant piles of jelly beans, I just find it gross. There's a pile of jelly beans on the floor.
Yeah, I think I'd need a napkin and some hand sanitizer if I'm doing that. Yeah, also, kids are full of germs as it is. Like,
yeah, they don't care if there's jelly beans on the floor.
So they're definitely going to do all of that. But it's just, I don't know. There is something. And also the way that they talk about how Flint's fixing the problem by just dumping it all into
like you
said, really, it's just, you don't really see that. It's just all molding and just disgusting food waste in the corner from this giant food they keep raining down on them. Yeah, it's kind of a horror, isn't it? It's kind of a horrific idea, but they have fun with it, and it's funny and it's fantastical, and I like the lens that they put it through. If you could make this like an Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but it's a food disaster film where it all goes wrong and the world is just covered in food and can't get rid of it, like an environmental disaster. Terrible.
Oh, I haven't seen the second one, but I think that's sort of the route they go down.
Really?
I think there's more sentient food, and I think it's a worldwide problem.
Oh my God.
They're sort of stuck. I mean, the title of this movie is really interesting, right? Because it seems to have almost no connection whatsoever with the book that it's based on, which shares the name, which raises the question of like, well, why even bother spending the money to license that book if all you're interested in is making a film where food falls out of the sky? But then what it means is you title your film Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, you have a fun animated movie about a mad scientist who creates an invention that goes wackily awry. But then when you come to make a sequel for it, you kind of have to make a movie about food that falls from the skies because it's called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs too. Whereas I think what could have been a more interesting premise for a film franchise is, well, what does Flint create next that goes wrong? It doesn't have to be a machine that makes food out of water. Like he does lots of different things in his lab. Like it could be anything, and you can have just another mad science disaster movie starring Flint Lockwood. But because it's called that, because it's based on a book that it has nothing to do with, you're slightly forced into the position of making it about food falling from the sky again.
Yeah, he's always going to be the food guy. It's like Oppenheimer. He's always going to be the guy who created the hydrogen bomb, and Flint's always going to be the guy who made this food machine that made it rain meatballs.
Yeah, become God bringer of meatballs.
Well, I think that's quite enough of this crazy food science. There's lots of disgustingness to be had with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and lots of ridiculousness from Return of the Killer Tomatoes. But I think it's been a fun pairing. It's been an unusual pairing, and one which I didn't think we'd really be covering in our Mad Science series. But I think it's one which has taken us on a journey through sci-fi, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad we got to talk about Return of the Killer Tomatoes and Killer Tomatoes in general. As you know, I love talking about god-awful movies like this. And listeners, if you enjoy that as well, do come on over to Patreon. We talk about bad movies very frequently over there in the Bad Movie Bunker. And I think Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, if we hadn't already discussed it today, would have been a perfect bunker movie.
Every time you hear that, do you go, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes in your head?
Yeah.
Yeah, every single time. It's like the weird science problem we had last time. Was that
Weird
science?
It's a good theme tune.
Yeah, again, it's an 80s thing, as we've established.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there'll be more crazy mad science theme tunes in the films we look at as the series progresses. But if you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can hear when the next episode drops.
You can find us on social media if you search Journey Through Sci-Fi, or you can come to our website, journeythroughsci-fi.com.
And if you want a free and easy way to support the podcast, why not leave us a review? Just pop a little review on your podcast app of choice. If you can give us 5 stars, we will be forever grateful, and we might even sing the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes theme tune to you when we see you.
If you like what we do, another way to support the show is to visit us on Patreon and subscribe for more of our bonus content there. I already mentioned the Bad Movie Bunker. We've covered a lot of bad movies. It's not the only thing we do over there, but the aforementioned Twisted Pair by Neil Breen, that's a great episode. I really enjoyed talking about that truly iconic bad movie. So come and join us on Patreon for more content like that.
Yes, the content on Patreon won't be stopping, but we will be having a slight pause in our Mad Science series as we take a bit of time off whilst we enjoy a bit of the summer. We're all going on holiday, aren't we?
Yes, we are off on our summer holidays. We will be taking a break from the Journey Through Mad Science. We've got an episode coming up. We'll be doing our Future Frontiers, talking about all the films coming out over the summer and everything that we're watching, and then we're off on our holidays.
Yes, but like I said, the content will keep coming on Patreon, so if you're interested in hearing more episodes, make sure you're over there and subscribed. That's it for today's episode. We'll be back again before you know it.